Hands like 5-6 suited and 9-10 suited can be really fun to play, especially when you hit your big flop and make a straight or flush and a huge pop. But while these hands have a lot of potential in them, you need to be careful that you don't let your stack bleed by playing too many suited connectors in bad situations. There's a key reason why it's generally best to play these hands from late position rather than early position. If you've ever read a poker book, I'm sure you've been beaten to death with the idea that position is power. Well, let me beat you over the head with it one more time by illustrating how much more difficult it is to play suited connectors out of position. In order to successfully make money with hands like 6-7 suited, you need to be able to control the pot size so that you aren't investing too much money before the flop or investing too much money after the flop when you have a drawing hand. Generally speaking, it's difficult to control the pot size when you're out of position. Plus, when in position, you don't have to give away any information about your hand until your opponents have already acted. Let's look at an example of how the same hand would play differently in position as opposed to being out of position. Let's say you called a small raise in position with 6-7 suited and the flop came Jack-9-4. It's just you and the pre-flop raiser and he checks to you. In this case, with position, you have two viable options. A, check and take the free card, or B, bet in the hopes of winning the pot on a semi-bluff. You'll often want to choose A just in case your opponent was looking to check raise you in the flop. If you do bet, your opponent may make a large check raise, forcing you to fold your drawing hand. How about if your opponent bets the flop, though? Once again, you have options. A, you can fold if the bet's too big. B, you can call and hope to catch your flush. Or C, you could raise in the flop as a semi-bluff. If the situation is reversed, though, and your opponent acted last, let's take a look at how that not only limits your options, but gives you much less control of the pot size. If you check on the flop, your opponent will bet if he has a strong hand. If you call on the flop, you have essentially handed over control of the hand to your opponent. That's not a bad idea, mind you, as you should always respect the fact that your opponent has position over you, and that's power. Still, though, checking and calling doesn't put you in a great situation, as it'll be difficult for you to win this pot with a bluff later in the hand. You're basically banking on making the flush and making the flush only. Now, if you check raise on the flop as a semi-bluff, that'll work when your opponent's bluffing, but it'll cost you a lot more money and could end up costing you the pot also if your opponent decided to re-raise you again. It's a risky move that may often work, but the cost is often very high when it doesn't. Suppose you bet the flop as a semi-bluff. Again, what that does is make the pot bigger, so that if your opponent likes the flop, he can now raise you a bigger amount. An amount so big that it forces you once again to fold your draw without even getting to see the turn card. So in position, you have the luxury of being able to take more free cards, keep the pot small, and maintain control of the hand. That's extremely valuable leverage. Out of position, there's a lot more guesswork to do, and it's often best to simply play it safe. As you can clearly see, it's easier to play suited connectors, or any hand for that matter, in position. Having said that, you don't want to become too predictable from the earlier positions. So sometimes you should still play suited connectors from early position. Mind you, when you do play them cautiously and don't get too fancy. Position is king, and you need to respect that power at all times.